Please be seated. Your Royal Highness, ladies and gentlemen, a very warm welcome to the Moredun campus today. Your Royal Highness, on behalf of all connected with the Moredun Foundation and our assembled partners, may I welcome you here to Pentland Science Park today to celebrate 100 years of excellence in animal health research. We are extremely grateful that you have joined us today to mark this important milestone in our journey. I sincerely hope that you will enjoy your day with us when we shall honour those far-sighted farmers and scientists who saw the need for research aimed at improving the health and welfare of their livestock. They realised that approaching this challenge in a collaborative fashion was much more likely to accelerate progress in animal husbandry, and that collaborative mindset remains a key facet of our approach to this day. Later in the day, we will ask you to formally unveil a plaque on our new Moredun mobile laboratory, a vehicle that I know you have already seen in action and which has already raised awareness in the valuable role that our scientists play in improving the health and welfare of our livestock. The photographs of our first mobile laboratory, described as a shepherd's hut on wheels, followed by those of our new laboratory, say much about the Moredun's appetite for getting close to the animals, and it is reassuring that this passion has not waned in 100 years of activity. When I first got involved with the Moredun family, I attended a lecture here in this very theatre when the then chair of the Moredun Research Institute, Lord Professor Sandy Trees, spoke with passion about the appliance of science, or to be more accurate, the lack of opportunity for that appliance. He spoke about the frustration of scientists in general who were unable to test their research in the areas in which they specialised, and contrasted that with the extremely close relationship which our scientists here at the Moredun enjoy with the agricultural industry. There is absolutely no doubt that the collaborative mindset has delivered substantial progress in animal health and welfare over the course of the last century, and as you will see today, is continuing in that vein. Indeed, it would be fair to say that that trait is even more pronounced today as we tackle new and growing challenges. The interaction between the Scottish Research Institutes has grown markedly in recent years. Indeed, we now have SRUC here on our campus, and the support from and shared strategy with Scottish Government will help to find solutions to the considerable challenges we all face. There is much debate at present about how best to address these challenges in animal health and welfare, zoonotic diseases, food security, financial and environmental sustainability, along with the huge threat of climate change. It is surely very clear that science is going to have to come up with the solutions to these major issues. And it is also very clear that a One Health holistic approach of collaboration and cooperation is the quickest route to success. To that end, we will hear from our scientists about how they are tackling these challenges in both animal and human health, about how the Moredun is attracting early career talented scientists from home and abroad, the fellowships we are offering for targeted research projects, and also from our farmer and regional advisor members about the reach which Moredun has out into the farming and rural industries. I would now move to our presentations for you, ma'am. Our first speaker this afternoon is Mungo Guthrie. I've had the privilege of knowing 2 generations of Guthries now. His father, I was a fellow director with his father at the Royal Highland Agricultural Society, and now Mungo's followed on from his father. Indeed, I served under Hugh, his father, who was chair of that society. So Mungo, if you'd like to come up and make your presentation, please. Thank you.
Your Royal Highness, ladies and gentlemen, this is indeed a great pleasure for me. My time at the Moredun, it goes back some 9 years ago when I was invited to join the Regional Advisory Board for the south of Scotland. But what's special about the Moredun? Well, I think you need to just come in round about Pentland Science Park, round about, and that's where the experience actually starts. You come round there and you know, coming into the settled environment of these buildings, there's so much going on, but what a great environment. There's so many influential people involved with the Moredun, and you've only got to look left or right of yourself sitting here today. Policymakers that are sitting here within this auditorium today, I often think that we can do so much more and achieve so much more in this relaxed, calming institute in this environment here today. Our boards, we have 5 advisory boards, and I'll start at the north of Scotland, the south of Scotland, north of England, south of England, and we also have Wales. And at some point we really want to encompass into the Irish because they are so hungry for the information that is produced out of the Moredun Foundation here. And through these boards we come together, the chairs 5 times a year, but the boards actually sit once a year and pull together and have informative meetings. And from these meetings we pull what is happening in the countryside from the north to the south, and then as I say, in the regional advisory boards the chairmen sit together and that filters through to the comms team, and the comms team take it towards the batty professors and scientists in here, because basically from a farmer's point of view that's what they are. It's that connection. We need the farmer to feed that information into them to actually get that on the ground with the scientists, which is great. From that, they produce the vaccines that we've been speaking about and we will hear more about, whether it's clostridial vaccines, pulpy kidney, lamb dysentery. Dare I say, we have a skittery calf on the farm. Rotovec was engineered within these walls, which was a great saviour to us as farmers to keep these calves going. We're now into aquatic life on sea lice, and also to mention equine grass sickness, which is a massive problem for any of us that have horses. But they need the contact with the livestock farmer and the professionals of the countryside. And we are great at creating life. We love creating life, whether it's the life of an animal or whether it's the life of grass. But we need to pull together with the scientists to do that. My connection to the board and the South of Scotland board, I'm going to take you back to that. We have lots of variations. We have vets from the West Coast. We have MSP farmers from the West Coast. We come across and we have sheep and cattle farmers. We have Kate Rowell with us today, QMS. Kate sits on the board with us. We have Scott Brown sits on the board with us. Scott is in the animal health industry. He takes invaluable information back to the farmer as a SQP. And as I say, that's invaluable information because the farmer relies on that type of information to decide what kind of drugs and vaccines that they use. We have Lorraine Lucas from Langholm. Lorraine really raised the point of OPA within the farming industry, within the sheep industry. Now, the sheep industry had buried their head in the sand with this problem. But through the Moredun, we have raised the awareness, and it's amazing how the younger generation of today and the sheep industry have now come to light and speak about that problem. It's one of the hardest things to actually find out whether your sheep are carrying OPA. John Bell from Fife. So we go right across from one coast to the other, from the borders with England right up to the Fife countryside. However, my part, I come right from the heart of Burns country. And in fact, my mother was born in the farm right next door to where Burns wrote most of his literature. And I'm going to recite a verse to you if I can, and if I get it right. And hopefully I don't need to talk about Peppa Pig. Ha! Where are you going, you crowling beast? Your impudence protects you sorely. I canna see, but you strut rarely. Our gauze and lace. Though faith, I fear, ye dine but sparely, on sic a place. Ye ugly creeping, blasted wonner, detested, shunned by saint and sinner. How dare you set your foot upon her, say fine a lady? Go somewhere else and seek your dinner on some poor body. Oh, Annie, dinna toss your heed and set your beasties all abreed. You little ken what blasted speed the beasties making. The winks and finger ends I dread. I'm noticed talking. Now, if the Moredun had been there in Burns's time in the 1780s, I'm quite sure that parasite would have been eradicated. That was to a louse. He wrote that in the church behind some well-dressed lady when he saw the beast going about in her hair. Anyway, my connection to the Moredun goes further back family-wise. My father sat in the board of the Moredun representing the Royal Highland and Agricultural Society in 2004 and was there for 3 years after that. However, it goes even further back than that. In my young days farming at home, our local vet practice, Mackenzie, Bryson and Marshall, there was a young vet student came out onto the farm at that time, her name Julie Allen. In 1977 to 1982, my sister and Julie went to Glasgow Vet School and graduated in 1982, Julie? Yep. Today, Professor Julie Fitzpatrick, leading us all. Well done. So COP26, climate change, we all have to play our part, even as farmers. We want to produce a safe, locally produced food for the consumer. We are the energy producer for the consumer, and I think we really must remember that, but we want that to be safe. We're the very best at converting grass, cereals, fruit into dairy products or meat products without any processed material within them. We want to work together, sustainable, healthy farming with the public health at our main interest. Agriculture is not the problem. I think it's the solution. Thank you very much.
Thank you very much, Mungo. I think you probably booked yourself 1 or 2 nights at some Burns suppers. To follow Mungo, we have Dr. Peter Nettleton. Peter had a stellar career here at the Moredun. He's a veterinary virologist. He was head of virology surveillance, and he is passionate about viruses. Over to you, Peter.
Thank you very much. Viruses are amazing. They're just a tiny speck of RNA or nucleic acid and protein, and they seem to have evolved with every single life form on the planet that we look at. So they've evolved with their own host and usually come to some sort of equilibrium with that host. Unfortunately, most of them are host specific. But we've seen recently that if a virus moves from one host to another, the consequences for individuals can be disastrous, and they can give us a real global wake-up call. So I don't really want you to take on the passion and admiration I have for them, but I think we can share, after the last 2 years, at least some mutual respect, however grudging. Now I want to take you back 50 years when I first came to Moredun. 50 years, almost to the day, I came through those doors on the old site at Moredun. That's because I'd been working at the Centre of Tropical Veterinary Medicine and the Scottish Agricultural College Veterinary Laboratory at King's Buildings for a year on a studentship. And I met there Bill Martin, who was then just come to Moredun and to set up a virology diagnostic and surveillance unit, and he invited me over for a short course on diagnostic virology, and he was one of the major inspirations for me carrying on and going into virology. So that was in 1971. So 1971 was also a seminal year because the first holy book of virology was produced. This is a report, the first report of the International Committee on Naming Viruses from animals, plants and insects are the only viruses in here. There are 512 of them, and those were the only ones that were well known enough to be classified and characterized. So I'll leave that there. That was 1971. I then went off for 8 years and worked in Africa and Birmingham and various other exotic places like that, and also in Pirbright, and then was lucky enough to come back in 1979. Sorry, I'm pressing the wrong thing. And worked here onwards. I came back to work in the virus surveillance unit, and also I came back to replace a distinguished virologist called John Vances, who had worked on border disease and BVD, these two viruses here, and had left me a chest full of wonderful viruses, all to the surprise of many, well labeled and characterized, partially characterized. And these are four of the little fellows here. And we measure the size of viruses in nanometers, and there are 1 million nanometers in a millimeter. So we'd need about 20,000 of these in a line to make a millimeter. So they're tiny, tiny, tiny. During that time, working with Dick Barlow in particular, we explained virus survival through persistently infected animals. We developed a whole range of diagnostic tests, evaluated vaccines, and these led to field studies, largely with George Calder from SAC, and control programs, which basically culminated in the BVD control program that we have run for the last 10 years, and that was due to the inspiration of Nigel Millar and Simon Hall, and it's been a great collaboration between farmers and vets and government organizations as well. So that was the upshot of that. So just coming, basically I came from industry and from universities, and when I came to Moredun, it was quite a relief and a nice place to come. A practical community-led research, and that was basically farmers and vets and governments and funders working on important research applications with a practical output, we hoped. It was open, friendly, stimulating and supportive colleagues, a high standard of academic scrutiny, definitely. It's a good size for cross-fertilization between disciplines, which you don't get in many other places at all. Collaboration with other laboratories was encouraged, and we were also encouraged to join national and international societies. And that was great. And I had many happy years here working with numerous colleagues. I haven't really got time to go into the details of the virus surveillance unit, which is now in the capable hands of Mara Rocky and her brilliant staff. But these are just some of the highlights that came out on livestock. It's really now the International Reference Centre for Laupingen and Border Disease Virus. In the 80s, we recognised a new strain of IBR virus, which came in probably from North America. We were able to commercialise some of the BVD diagnostics. And then just to show you that there are more coronaviruses in the world than we've been led to believe, this is the Rotavirus coronavirus vaccine that Munger referred to. So there is bovine coronavirus as well, which are in this vaccine. Fortunately, they don't cause serious disease, but they do contribute to respiratory and enteric diseases as well. And those were the viruses discovered in calf diarrhea. We also, because we had the facilities and the expertise, we also got involved with wildlife. Malignant catarrhal fever came to the fore as farmed deer grew in Scotland, and different susceptibilities of different species of deer were worked on. There's now a potential vaccine to protect African cattle exposed to wildebeest, who have a virus which is, when it crosses into cattle, can cause serious losses. We got involved with the seal morbillivirus, which was quite an exciting enterprise because we used to get them in live and they weren't very happy, and you had to avoid them. We worked on squirrel parapox virus, which is transmitted from greys to red squirrels, and we looked at Pyrenean chamois pestiviruses. It's like a border disease virus, but in Pyrenean chamois. And then more recently, Mara has diagnosed rabid hemorrhagic disease in a wee outbreak not very far from here, which again is a new form of this particular virus, which has caused deaths in rabbits. So that's all I really have to say in the time. I would just like to say that, conclude with some remarks. Obviously, the first one speaks for itself, and it's even more apparent now because although I showed you the first report of the International Committee on the Taxonomy of Virus, I'll show you the 9th report. And that's where we're at now. There's viruses in there from sea anemones to coral to everything. And it's well worth reading. I think it's probably going to be the last paper report they produce. It'll all be online from now on because the next one would be about that big. It's really an important source of virological expertise in the UK. That was shown in the 2001 foot and mouth disease epidemic. And more recently, it was really pleasing to see staff from MRI and from SRUC joining together. That's a very synergistic relationship between those two. And they were able to help test for the SARS virus. So I've got a huge thanks to say to many colleagues I've worked with, some of whom are here, some of them are not, and also to all the farmers, the auctioneers, the vets, everyone else we've ever come in contact with. And finally, I'd like to say thank you very much to Your Royal Highness for coming and supporting us. Your interest in our work and your long-lasting support is much appreciated, and your presence is always uplifting. So thank you very much.
Peter, thank you very much indeed for that. I think the images of those two books will remain with us as to how the discipline has moved on. We now have Dr. Francesca Chianini, who is a veterinary pathologist. She has worked throughout Europe and the UK, and she is a leading specialist in pathology. Francesca.
Your Royal Highness, ladies and gentlemen, it's my honor and privilege to introduce you and to take you through a very brief introduction of the importance of pathology in the discovery and research of diseases. Joined Moredun in 2002 to study Scrapie and BSc, but certainly Moredun was not new to Scrapie research. Indeed, in the 1930s, some scientists carried out an unwanted experiment. So they were developing Laupinil vaccine, which ended up being a very successful vaccine, but without knowing they used a brain from a sheep that was infected with Scrapie 2, and so a large area of research was created. This is a picture that goes back to 2002 when I was hired, and I want to take this occasion to thank the 3 brilliant scientists and colleagues that gave me an interview and hired me. David Buxton, who was then the head of pathology and was my pathology mentor and line manager for a long time. Well, Peter, you've just listened to him. And Hugh Reid, who was the head of the virology department and lead of the TSC program. So they gave me this enormous opportunity to be a veterinary research pathologist and collaborate with fantastic scientists. And also, like as Peter, I want to thank everyone involved in the research who participated, farmers, colleagues, everyone. Again, as it was said in more than one occasion, so far collaboration is key, and that more than collaboration is encouraged, and it took it provided really good outcome in many occasions. But I just want to explain about one example that dates back to the 70s when Hugh Reid started a partnership in research with Peter Doherty, who was then like a pathologist. He just finished his PhD in pathology at the Moredun Institute with the Edinburgh School. So they started doing research in Laupinil, but an unfortunate day during an experiment, Peter Doherty got infected with the Laupinil virus. So like as a very good colleague, Hugh Reid went on to visit him every morning and took back sample of blood to the lab to study. And the success of this partnership was that they ended up publishing a paper in Lancet, which is not a small deal. But certainly this is not the best part of the story, because Laupinil did not really affect Doherty's brilliant mind. And so in 1996, he went on to be the first and only veterinarian in the world to get the Nobel Prize award in physiology and medicine. But of course, well, collaboration went on. Pathology was crucial in the study of many diseases, virus like OPA, retrovirus, bacteria, Ionis disease, and protozoan, toxoplasma. But so what is that is so special about pathology? Pathology is a lengthy technique. It requires an enormous amount of training for the histologists, for the pathologists. Well, I think that the magic of pathology is that starting from a sample, the pathologist can really take an instantaneous image of what's going on inside the tissue, and so has the privilege to know what's going on, and many times to relate it to the agent inside the tissue, as is the case in this image. This is a neuron infected with Laupinil. Since I started my career, I was told that pathology was going to be overtaken by other discipline, more modern, quicker, maybe more objective, like flow cytometry and PCR, sequencing and deep sequencing. So far, not very much has happened. After 30 years, I'm still sitting at the microscope with a bunch of slides. So my take is that likelihood for the future is that pathology is here for staying, because at the end of the day, seeing is believing. So thank you all for your attention.
Francesca, thank you very much for that super presentation. We now move on to Dr. Alastair Nisbet, who's head of our vaccine programme. And as you can imagine, a lot of focus on the future with that. Alice.
Thank you. Your Royal Highness, ladies and gentlemen, it's my great pleasure to tell you today about vaccine development at Moredun in the context of today's agenda, which is Back to the Future. So, first of all, looking back, of course, we have a very rich history at Moredun of the production of vaccines to help the livestock industry. And that history doesn't just involve the production of vaccines, it involves identifying what the causative agent of a disease is right at the start, and then taking that all the way through to producing a vaccine which is then licensed for manufacture, or in some cases we've produced ourselves. So looking at some of our past successes, over on your left here, we have a vaccine that was produced against clostridial diseases that were being spoken about a little bit earlier, Braxy and lamb dysentery. These were the diseases that really vexed the people who set up the Moredun in the first place, and these were very early successes in terms of vaccine production. And this is a vaccine that is still used worldwide in the livestock industry today. Another example similar to that is the production of the vaccine for respiratory disease, the Pasteurella pneumonia vaccine, again developed and produced here at Moredun, and again still used in various forms worldwide today. And we've already heard something about the Laupinil virus vaccine that again was developed and produced here at Moredun. And we know from speaking to our stakeholders and our foundation members that was a real game changer in terms of farming in areas that were tick infested, because Laupinil virus is of course a tick transmitted virus, and this allowed people to raise sheep and game in areas where ticks existed. I want to just stick with Laupinil virus vaccine while we start to think about the future. So the original vaccines that were produced here were based on growing the virus and then inactivating the virus and then using that as a vaccine. And that was successful and commercially successful for a number of years, but a couple of years ago it was dropped as a product. And as a result of that, there was a huge demand from our stakeholders and from our foundation members for a replacement vaccine, because they were having increasing issues with louping ill, both in sheep and in game birds. And as a result of that demand, our scientists have been working on two new approaches to develop a louping ill vaccine, which is a different approach to what was taken previously. The first of these is hopefully a relatively short-term gain, and that is to take the antigens or the proteins from the virus that actually provoke the immune response and to produce these as virus-like particles. So these are little particles that are the same size as the virus, but they're not infectious. They don't contain any of the nucleic acids that we were talking about earlier. And hopefully that will be a relatively short-term gain. We're literally testing this as we speak as a new vaccine. Longer term, we're adopting some of the technologies that have been used in the development, for example, of the AstraZeneca COVID-19 vaccine, where we use a different virus to deliver those antigens for the virus that we're trying to protect against. So we have a team now working on using the mydevisna virus to deliver louping ill virus proteins to produce a vaccine. And the benefit of that is that you can actually load lots of different vaccine antigens into there to protect against lots of different diseases. So that's the future for our louping ill programme. So far, we've been talking about bacteria and viruses. Beyond that, we've had success in developing vaccines against much more complex organisms, not quite human head lice yet, Mungo, but much more complex organisms like parasitic nematodes, the worms that live in the guts of livestock. And over the past 25 years or so, the product Barbavax was developed. This is the world's first vaccine to control a parasitic worm in the gut of sheep, and still the only vaccine to do so. And this has been on the market in Australia and South Africa since 2014 to control Barber's pole worm, which is a big problem in the tropics and the subtropics. That success has really driven a lot of our other vaccine programs to try to control complex organisms. And closer to home, of course, we still have parasitic nematodes that infect the gut of sheep. However, those nematodes, these worms, don't consume as much blood as Barber's pole worm, and so they're more difficult to control with a vaccine. So we have to take a different approach. And that approach is to really understand that interaction between the parasite and the host. What's the parasite doing to the host to cause it damage, and what's the host doing to the parasite to try to get rid of it? And so over a number of years, we've developed a program to further develop a vaccine to control the nematodes that we have in temperate regions. And we've had some success in this area. And again, this is a world first. So this is a purely synthetic vaccine that we're now developing to try to control these worms in temperate regions. And this is, as I said, had some success, and we're now driving this towards further use and commercialization. As I mentioned, when we start a vaccine program, what we really need to understand, no matter which pathogen we're looking at, is what is the interaction between that pathogen and the host? Because that then tells us what we can do to try and understand the host's response and to try to build a vaccine around that whole interaction. And recently, we've been using organoids at the Institute to try to understand that host pathogen interaction. Now, organoids are microscopic versions of the original organ, so that we can grow in the laboratory in 3D culture. So on your left here, we see this is actually an organoid that represents a sheep's stomach. It's somewhat bigger than a virus, but it's still only a couple of hundred micrometers in diameter. And inside it, you can see nestling. This is a parasitic nematode of sheep's stomach. And so we can use this system to really understand what that interaction is. On your right, this is an organoid developed from a cattle, from a bovine stomach, and it's just being invaded by one of these parasitic worms. And so no matter which pathogen we're looking at in our portfolio of 18 current vaccine development programs, we can use this system to really understand what's going on. And this is the future of understanding that host-parasite interaction. Looking further in the future, many of you will have seen that the Oxford English Dictionary word of the year for 2021 was vax, encompassing all things to do with vaccines. And the Cambridge Dictionary 2021 word of the year was perseverance. Now, I think actually both of those terms are entirely applicable to everything we've done at Moredun over the last 100 years to get to where we are. And they will be equally applicable to everything we do for the next 100 years in vaccine development. And hopefully we'll get there a little bit sooner than we have done in the past. Thank you very much indeed.
Alastair, thank you very much for that. That was absolutely fascinating. Our final presenter is Dr. Cathy Geyer. She is a new Moredun Foundation Research Fellow, and Cathy is going to address us on her very interesting project. Cathy.
Your Royal Highness, ladies and gentlemen. The fellowship programs launched here at Moredun within the last few years represent great research opportunities, career opportunities for new researchers like myself, and they allow us to tackle complex animal diseases within a relatively owned environment, well supported. And one of these ones is the Equine Grass Sickness Fellowship, and that's what I'd like to talk to you about today. So equine grass sickness has had a long-standing history and connection with Moredun and ADRA in the earlier days. And this goes back to the 1920s, during a time in which grass sickness impacted a huge proportion of the working horses. So in certain areas, up to 20% of the animals came down with the disease. And this had a great impact on the agricultural sector at that time. And it actually even accelerated the introduction of machinery. And then in the 1970s and 80s, John Gilmore here at Moredun, he continued the work on equine grass sickness. And since 1988, the Moredun Foundation is also home to the Equine Grass Sickness Fund. So equine grass sickness was first reported in 1907 in Angus. And it's generally a disease that's associated with Scotland. However, the disease occurs throughout the UK and also in other parts of the world, but the UK is the worst affected country. It's a devastating neurodegenerative disease of equines, and it's now thought that a neurotoxin is involved in this, which leads to damage within mainly the digestive tract. It's a fatal illness, so unfortunately for the vast majority of horses, there's not much that can be done, and the animals just have to be put down and put out of the misery. It's a very challenging disease to work with for vets as well as researchers. For vets, because there is no vaccine available, there's no treatment options, and we don't even have a definitive diagnostic test. For researchers, because despite over 100 years of research into the disease, we still don't know what the causes of grass sickness are, and it's still all quite a mystery. So we now know, though, that it's a complex disease and that it's a lot of different factors feeding into it, so it's most likely multifactorial. So leading to this perfect storm scenario, factors coming from the horse itself as well as also from the environment. And the fellowship provides a great opportunity for us to tackle these different factors within a multidisciplinary research team. So working together with researchers from various different fields within the Moredun, so tapping into the knowledge of the other fellows, already established researchers, as well as also working together with researchers from other institutions to hopefully finally get to the bottom of the disease. Research in the past has most likely also been hampered by a lack of coherent sample collection due to the acuteness and the sporadicness of the disease. So one of the big aims of the fellowship was to actually set up a national equine grass sickness biobank and database to actually collect these samples and use them for research. And this has been a very big collaborative project. So we work together with vet practices all across the UK. So currently we have over 40 practices on board and referral centres, and we also work very closely with the owners, who without this would not be possible. So this was successfully launched earlier this year, the biobank, and we've already got a great collection of samples and have received great support from vets as well as the owners. And these samples are available for anyone to work on, wants to work on equine grass sickness. So this is an ongoing project, so we intend to further expand our network that network, as well as also raise more awareness of the disease, as well as of our biobank project, to increase our sample collection and then have a good collection of samples available for us to pursue some of these collaborative projects and hopefully find answers to all these questions. We also, as Alastair Nisbet already said, there's already good expertise within Moredun to actually study these organoids, so study diseases with organoids in vitro, and the fellows and some of the postdocs have done a great job on developing ovine and bovine organoids, and we would like to do the same with our equine tissues to actually be able to aid our causative agent investigations. We also have longitudinal study sites. These are premises we've had several cases in the past, and for us these are fundamental in order to understand why certain areas or certain premises are more likely to have grass sickness cases. And two of these sites are Belwade Farm and Balmoral, and both of them we've received great support from them. And for us, again, they are fundamental to identify novel research directions and research activities. So yeah, I hope I could give you a brief insight into how we here at Moredun attempt to tackle equine grass sickness, and how the fellowship programs and the fellows can contribute to any ongoing research here at Moredun. Thank you very much.
Kathy, thank you very much for your presentation. I wish you and your team all the best of luck in tackling this distressing and debilitating disease. We now move on to the presentation of our Centenary Awards, and Professor Julie Fitzpatrick is going to read the citations. Julie.
Thank you, Gareth. Your Royal Highness, ladies and gentlemen, I'm really delighted to be able to introduce the Centenary Awards. We're only a year late. These were due to be given out last year, but we obviously postponed our centenary celebrations until this month, so we're delighted that everyone's here. I want to speak about Professor Willie Donachie. Willie's scientific career began at Glasgow College of Technology in 1972 before he went on to the University of Glasgow, where he qualified with first-class honours BSc degree in microbiology. But Willie's outstanding achievements for livestock health and welfare really started on the 14th of August 1978, when he came to Moredun as a higher scientific officer. Little did he know at that point that he would be at the same institute and the same group more than 35 years later. Willie became senior scientific officer in microbiology, where he undertook pioneering work on bacterial diseases of ruminants, and especially on Pasteurella hemolytica or Mannheimia hemolytica. The bacteriologists are always changing the names of their bacteria, and it's one of the most devastating causes of pneumonia in those species. Willie's understanding of the disease pathogenesis and the molecular biology of the organism led him to develop a world-leading vaccine for Pasteurella, and that was based on understanding the iron-regulated proteins involved in that process. It wasn't all plain sailing though, because Willie's expertise was really essential in commercialising the vaccine and in defending the patent that was involved. And the vaccine has been and continues to be a massive international success. One of the vaccines on Al Nisbet's slides was of the Pasteurella vaccine. And that success has been both in financial terms to the institute and the companies manufacturing the vaccine. But of course, the huge benefit is to the health of the animals who are helped by prevention of that disease. Willie received the Royal Agricultural Society of England's Award for Technology in 2002. That was the first time that award had been awarded for vaccine development. Willie then moved on to become Deputy Director of MRI of the Institute, and he played an outstanding role in ensuring the scientific direction and excellence of the research and development. He was a fantastic supporter to all directors. I think there was 4. I hope I get that number right. And I personally always appreciated his sound advice and humour. On the very odd occasion when I would say things are looking bleak, Willie, he would say, no, 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 it was much more bleak X number of years ago, and we managed to get out of it. So he always managed to cheer us up. He was Deputy Director until 2012, and then he moved, not too far, but he did move offices to become Managing Director of Moredun Scientific. John Jeffrey, our ex-chair of the Institute, called Willie Mr. Moredun, and I think that really sums him up. The link between Willie and Moredun is inextricable. So I would like to invite the Princess Royal to make the award to Willie to receive the Moredun Centenary Award for outstanding scientific contribution to Moredun. Willie, would you like to say a few words?
Your Royal Highness, ladies and gentlemen, just like to say, when I arrived at Moredun in 1978, I truly did not expect this, and it's a pleasure and delight to receive this award. As Julie said, all the years I've worked here, I think Peter Nettleton said it more eloquently than I could, and his slide showed what Moredun has for a scientist who comes here and wants to learn. And I certainly did. The people I worked with in the Pastorella team, I owe a great debt of gratitude. To all my colleagues, everywhere in the Institute, the interdisciplinary work that was necessary was there. And also to the 4 directors have always given me absolute encouragement and support. And also those of you who are directors and the farmers who are involved in Moredun have always been extremely understanding that it takes a long time for research to get from the lab bench into some sort of product. It was 12 years for the Pastorella vaccine, and a lot of work and a lot of challenges, but we did it. One final thing is a call out to the Moredun scientific group. I think they're a dedicated bunch who work over there on the commercialisation, and they actually deliver, you know, sort of financial support and also reputational support in a wider environment. So that's all I have to say. Thank you again. I really appreciate this. It means a lot to me. Thank you.
Thanks, Willie, and it's great to see Willie back at the Institute, although he is a regular visitor. I'd also now like to speak about Ian Duncan Millar. Ian has been an outstanding leader in the UK sheep industry for many years. He was one of the earliest practitioners of performance testing in hill sheep, an early proponent of cooperative breeding schemes, and a highly valued advisor to researchers developing breeding indices for UK hill sheep. He was an early advocate and practitioner of cooperation in the UK lamb sector through his directorship of Highland Glen Producers Limited and as a director of numerous industry bodies, some of which are in the audience today. Ian was chair of the UK Fallen Stock Company from 2004 to 2012, and he provided very strong and wise leadership in what was a difficult time. In recognition of these contributions, Ian was made Fellow of the Royal Agricultural Societies and an MBE in 2010. Ian joined the board of Moredun Research Institute in 2003, where he did fantastic work, then taking over the chair of the Moredun Foundation from 2012 to 2020. During that time, he's provided vision and expertise, supporting collaboration with industry leaders and technical advisors, all to ensure the impact of our livestock science. He literally attended numerous events here at Moredun and actually all around the country. No venue was too far for Ian. He went everywhere, acting and speaking at our roadshows, which I think was great. He was a real ambassador for the work that we do. And he was really dedicated to trying to make sure that the tools and programmes that we were developing were actually used by the farming community. Ian was actually due to be chair in 2020 at our centenary, but he has been very ably replaced by Gareth Baird in the meantime. But again, on a personal level, Ian was a fantastic chair to work with, someone I could always turn to when I needed sound advice and clear thinking. So everyone here at Moredun is absolutely delighted that Ian is to receive 2 awards, the Fellowship of the Moredun Foundation, but also the Moredun Centenary Award for outstanding contribution to the Moredun Foundation. Thank you. You do say a few words.
Your Royal Highness, ladies and gentlemen, thank you. I very much appreciate this, and I particularly appreciate it having been presented by Your Royal Highness. It means a lot to me, and I very much do appreciate it. I will honour this going forward, and I will treasure it as a great memento of my time at Moredun. When I first got involved with the MRI all these years ago, I used to smile when I read the minutes of the meetings, when I was looking at the list of people who attended, because there were a number of professors, there were several doctors, latterly there was a lord who was also a professor, and there was one Mr, and that was me. But I very quickly realised that actually that one Mr was a symbol of the very close connection which we have here at Moredun between the scientists and the farming community. And that has been one of the strengths of what we do, and it has been a great strength to connect the science with the farms. During my time, there have been enormous changes. The science has moved on, the science way of doing things has changed, the tools have changed, the outcomes have changed, mostly for the benefit of my colleagues on the farms. But the world out there has changed also. We have seen climate change, the environment, taking precedent over food production. And sometimes agriculture is seen as the bad boys by those who don't know any better. But actually we should remember that there is a universal truth out there. And that is that the #1 responsibility of government at any level, whether it be from households up to national or international governments, is feed the people. And sometimes the politicians forget that. But as we move forward, the pressure to improve productivity of agriculture will be enormous. And for animal health and welfare, that means that we will be relying more heavily than ever on science to give us the tools and give us the knowledge that we can deliver that food production. So I see that the outputs from here at Moredun will be more important in the future, maybe than they have been over the last 100 years. So I think the get up and go attitude, which started off ADRA in 1920, will be required again in the future, perhaps even in greater measure than it has been hitherto. So Gareth, I wish you and your team every success in rising to those challenges and delivering, as I'm sure you all will. I've enjoyed my time as being part of the team. I've managed to rub shoulders with a huge number of extremely clever individuals. I've enjoyed the friendship and camaraderie, not just of the people who work here at Moredun, but of those people who give of their time to help run the various boards. I feel that they all collectively have enriched Moredun, and I'm very honoured that I feel my life too has been enriched by working with you all. So thank you very much, and thank you for these presentations.
Thank you very much, and I'm now delighted that Her Royal Highness the Princess Royal is going to say a few words. Thank you.
Thank you, Julie. Well, ladies and gentlemen, it's always a pleasure to come here, not least of all because I always learn something, but it's also to celebrate the beginning of the next 100 years. 100 years precisely last year, but we can celebrate, I think, looking forward this year. But it's also a pleasure to present it what I don't think the recipients yet know is a silver centenary quaich as part of those celebrations. But there is a link here. So the silversmith, Ewan Poole, who made the quaichs, is the great-great-grandson of a Mr. W.A. Poole, MRCVS, who was the scientific director at Moredun from 1926 to 1929. So we forget nobody in our travels, and they all have an ability to contribute in a range of different ways. So I'm delighted to be able to do that. And it was also him that commissioned the original mobile laboratory, which was quite an innovative concept, never mind the practicalities of getting a wheeled vehicle onto most farms in those days. So congratulations. And I'll mention its successor later. But that link, that important link with farmers, the understanding of farmers in 1920 that they needed their support to make really good use of the knowledge that was available. And because of them in 1920, Moredun is known throughout the world for its research into prevention, which I suspect is one of the reasons that the profile is not as high as it ought to be, because prevention is very hard to measure. But the control of infectious diseases of livestock is very easy, isn't it? If it works, people kind of forget that it's a problem. Again, not a good way of celebrating what you've achieved, because people don't notice anymore. But the key to what you were doing was, because of the farmers, was understanding the individual farmers, farms, the methods that they needed to use, and the environment in which they worked, because that was critical to your ability to come up with the right answers. Generally speaking, the health and welfare of animals around the world has been greatly improved by Moredun's work on the understanding and the causes of disease. The development of accurate and sensitive diagnostic tests and disease prevention through vaccination and treatment methods have grown on that initial investment of knowledge and understanding. And of course, the Moredun to some extent was affected by the First World War, because it was directly after that which saw an increased demand for homegrown food, and actually a significant rise in the market value of livestock, we wish. Does anybody remember that? But this emphasised the seriousness of the losses associated with disease, and the concerned farmers voiced their strong support for an organised body to conduct the research specifically into livestock diseases. And I think it's the specifically into livestock diseases that the Moredun changed in that respect. So in March 1920, that group of enlightened farmers held a public meeting at the Highland and Agricultural Society's chambers in Edinburgh. I only smile because if you said that held a public meeting anywhere now, that would imply disruption and difficulties. They were, obviously that didn't happen. But they were representatives from the Highland and Agricultural Society, the Scottish Chamber of Agriculture, and the Farmers Union of Scotland. And that's where the creation of the Animal Diseases Research Association came from. And that mission to develop innovative solutions to prevent and control disease, and perhaps more importantly, and this has remained a core of their activities, to become a centre for education and training in livestock health and welfare. It was a core then, it's certainly a core now, 100 years later and onwards. In the early days, much of that research itself came from that shepherd's hut on wheels. It could visit remote farms. You'd kind of wonder just how far they got, but it certainly took the laboratory a great deal closer than it had ever been before, looking in the field to look for those causes of disease. And here we are in the centenary, recognising, I think, both the relevance and the increase in technology, which allows you to provide even greater support in a mobile context. Moredun has designed and built a new mobile laboratory to continue to enable the research, education and outreach work. Yes, in tribute to Moredun's past, but also recognising that it is still, that is as good a way as any of getting the information and help to the farmers where they need it. Technology has helped in the sense that you can disseminate information more accurately, but if you're going to tackle diseases, you actually have to go to where the animals are. And if you can get the answer there quicker, everybody benefits. We've been discovering about those early successes in discovering the cause and developing treatment methods and vaccines for Braxy, Lyme dysentery and loafing ill. But further research discovered the cause of many other diseases such as scrapie, pine, milk fever, John's disease, respiratory and reproductive disorders, and the vaccines, diagnostics and treatment strategies that were developed alongside of them. I remember going to ADRA's buildings, King's Buildings in Edinburgh. So they did a lot of that work from those facilities for 78 years. Didn't come here until 1998, but I am reminded of that every time I come through the door. Moredun's research in developing diagnostic tests has been of vital importance in the recent initiative here to eradicate that bovine viral diarrhea and the control of sheep scab. Although sheep scab probably depends more on that rather special relationship between the farmer and the scientist in the ability to create the right reporting and the right behaviour that will really make a change for sheep scab in our flocks. Having said that, the impact of the Moredun's work is seen across the world, particularly our recent highlights being the development of the first vaccine to protect against a parasitic worm in Australia and a vaccine to protect cattle against the malignant catarrhal fever in Africa. And Moredun is also conducting research in One Health, where work to combat disease in animals will also bring developments and benefits to human, wildlife, and also the health of the environment. Getting those in the right order and the right place and understanding where that works is a key. The veterinary diagnostic and surveillance staff and laboratories at Moredun and Scotland's Rural College, of course, joined forces with the NHS to expand testing capacity during the COVID pandemic. That underlines the skill sets here, the understanding of infectious diseases and how it can relate to those and the human needs in science as well. And looking at some of those next challenges that we face today, changing climate. Yes, I don't think Moredun has been around long enough to have experienced too many changes in the climate, but they have happened. Pressures for land use, growing global population, production of safe, nutritious and sustainable food supplies, and how you define that will be very much part of your future. Soil health management and measurement. As it happens, I was with the British Nutrition Foundation yesterday and we had a speaker from Devonish in Northern Ireland talking about soil health measurement, and that Northern Ireland, and it underlines the importance of having a link there, have decided that they will not just measure individual farms, they'll measure the whole of Northern Ireland's soil content using technology they didn't have available before. I think that's something you should all keep an eye on, but it shows where technology can take us if we get it right. That I think will help a lot, but finding solutions to tackle infectious diseases in livestock remains a key to all that you do. And as we note with the changing climates, that could be more important than ever with the emerging infections changing disease patterns, and growing concerns about the development of resistance to antibiotics and antiparasitic drugs and medicines. And that, of course, is not just an issue for livestock, that is an issue for humans as well. Discovery, collaboration, which I think, again, you've all underlined, is a particular importance here at Moredun. Developing solutions and sharing knowledge are the core principles of Moredun's work. And the outputs and the impact from this still unique organisation have been remarkable. I hope that our early pioneers would agree that that vision for Moredun, for farmers and scientists to work together to tackle diseases of livestock, have been a highly successful and inspiring one, and that they would be satisfied for the time being, pleased that it's functioned as well as they could have hoped, but has a real future in terms of its structure remaining the same and its core principles remaining the same. And I hope that everyone involved in the organisation is very proud of what they have collectively achieved over 100 years. Moredun Centenary initiative to encourage talented early career researchers to develop new research to tackle livestock disease is very exciting. And I really look forward to what Moredun will achieve, well, certainly in the next few years, although the next 100 years is probably beyond me. I think we should aim that it will be needed for at least another 100 years, because nothing remains stationary or the same for long, as this book, Viruses, tends to illustrate. And I think those of us who have livestock and try to farm, we do our best to try and remove some of the diseases and the challenges that they face. Some respond better than others. Some sheep, still born to die.
Your Royal Highness, thank you very much for your kind, wise and thoughtful words. I think there's a few of us in here who would share your opinions about sheep. And anyway, I wonder if we could possibly ask you to unveil our centenary plaque before we go into the atrium. Thank you very much. Thank you very much indeed. Thank you very much. We will now proceed to the atrium.